when I meet other trans people, there's a certain look that we give each other. We're almost looking at each other like, I can't believe you made it. I can't believe I'm seeing you. There's a thing that happens with us. We're like, what's up? How are you? You know? How did you make it? When did you know? You know? How did you make it here? That thing that we have, that's camaraderie. That's I got your back. Because more often than not, and I'm not saying this is how we want it to be, it's the opposite. More often than not, we are actually all we got.
These kind of relationships that get disturbed when we don't take the time to know what it is to sing, to know how to get close to the mic again, or to get something. Singing doesn't make it happen, or maybe.
Welcome to another episode of Tune the Fork. I feel very fortunate today. I have with me a person, a human being that has had a lot of different, parts of her journey, or their journey, shared to a lot of people. Maybe this is me being very nervous. I'm super nervous. Okay, just want to make sure. I think once I put it out there and give it light, it goes away.
Yeah, just talked about this with my therapist yesterday. Naming it is really important.
Yeah. I'm nervous.
Okay. No need to be.
Chantaneice, thank you for being here.
Yes.
I am glad you agreed to come on. I feel for me personally, I need help with some things. But before I make it about me, I really want to make sure that I create space for you. Otherwise, we're going to share, I feel, to the degree that we can.
Totally.
Where are you from?
That's a great question. Originally I'm from Harlem. I'm born and raised in Harlem, New York. I think it's a very particular importance to say Harlem and not any other, not Manhattan. I'm from a very specific part.
Okay.
And that's a lot of my whole family's from Harlem. My whole family has a lot of history in Harlem, and it's a very deep history. So that's where I'm from.
Now, when I found out about you, it was through some music stuff. I posted a picture, I posted something, and you liked it. And I went down a rabbit hole of trying to find out, because my numbers ain't where they are going to be, I should say. So when people tap in, I'm curious.
Yeah, of course.
And I went down, I saw you, and went down a rabbit hole to learn about Father Venus and to learn about this clothing brand that you started. And it was the clothing brand that actually was like, I'm in on that.
Saturn Says,
Talk to me about what Saturn Says is.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of a story I'll try to make short, but my partner and I were teachers in New York and Brooklyn, and taught at a high school for the 2 years of the pandemic. And that was crazy. It was terrible. Amongst many other things, like just being a teacher in general, but I was also transitioning at that time. And I was receiving a lot of discrimination, from a school that was supposed to be not about that. It's like left-leaning black leadership, it was a shock. It was like, oh, okay. Not everybody is really about this life, basically. And that forced us to kind of say, like, we can't survive here, So we moved to Detroit, and Saturn Says comes from the fact that our generation right now, I'm 31. You know, if you are familiar with astrology at all, everybody goes through what's called a Saturn return. This is every 28 or 27 and a half to 29 years or so, where Saturn, the planet of discipline, it's like the father planet, you know, breaking down structure, creating structure where it's supposed to be, letting go what you are not supposed to have in your life. It will get rid of that by all means. It comes back around to the place where it was when you were born, but it only happens every 28 years. We only go through this hopefully 3 times, but you know, maybe 2. The first one's a big one, and we were going through that, and you know, Saturn says comes from that space of being like, we're gonna take the lessons that are really difficult right now, that feel like we're being like hammered right now. Like, you know, it felt like everything was happening. I mean, like it's you name it, you know, it happened. And if you take the lessons of that and you decide like, I'm gonna accept this, and I'm gonna move with this new purpose, you know. Saturn says came from that. Like this is Saturn saying to us, for the next 30 years, what do you want? You know, I'll see you again in 30 years. And I want to see what you've done over the last, you know, this time with the 2 years that I spent coming back to your chart.
Okay.
So that's where Saturn says comes from, you know, that drive, that passion of wanting to put out those lessons to other people. We're all going through it. We've all gone through it.
Yeah.
You know, so that's where that comes from.
So you said transitioning.
Mm-hmm.
What were you transitioning from?
Yeah. So in the trans world, what it's called is being AFAB. So I was assigned female at birth. So AFAB.
Acronym.
Yep, it's an
Gotcha.
acronym. Yeah, tons of acronyms, you know?
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
It's funny because there's acronyms everywhere. Even at my job, I'm like, they be acronyming everywhere, everything. But yeah, it's assigned female at birth. And when you really put it into context, I mean, that's what happened, you know? Somebody, a baby came out. They said, let's look at the genitals and let's decide which box. Without any consent, consideration,
Okay.
nothing. So for up until 29, I was existing in a space where I was being perceived and perceiving myself to be a woman, to be a queer woman, to be a masculine of center woman. And, you know, to have the breakthrough, which was its own story in itself, but to have the breakthrough of like, I don't identify with that.
Okay.
You know, I don't identify with being a man either, and that's also a really important decision and an important discernment.
Okay.
I identify with being a human being who can hold both of those boxes.
Okay.
You know, yeah.
I got 32,372,415 questions.
Yeah.
Just about that.
Yeah.
But I want to go back.
Go.
Chantaneice.
Yes.
Was that the name you were assigned
Yes.
at birth?
That was my mom made that name up for me when she was in like 8th grade or something like that.
Okay.
You know, my mom had me when she was 15. And I think it's significant because, you know, it's funny, I cut my hair a couple weeks ago and people was like, are you changing your name now? And I was like, nah, like I love my name. You know, I'm the only one with this name. Maybe there's someone, but I was the first. That's my mom's name for me, and that's the name that I feel most, you know, connected to, you know, and I'd be damned somebody tell me the name belongs in one area or another.
Right.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
What was your childhood like?
Yeah. My childhood, I think, you know, on one end, very traumatic. My dad, I think the most traumatic thing was losses, you know. My father passed away, was killed in the building that we lived in, you know, like in the staircase.
In Harlem.
In Harlem. Came home from school, saw the cops. This is a normal occurrence though. So I'm like, oh, no problem, you know. Aunt's outside, she's like, what are you doing here? I'm like, what do you mean, what am I doing here? Like, what are you doing here? You know,
Yeah.
Not knowing if I knew or not, but, you know, went up the elevator, like stopped on the floor where everything was happening, saw all the people, cops and all types of people, you know, still not knowing what's going on, going upstairs and then seeing a whole crowd of people on the floor that we lived on, and then my mom pulling me through the crowd to tell me like, oh, this happened. You know?
How old were you?
11.
And so when I asked about your childhood, that was the first place your mind went to.
Yeah.
How were you processing that at 11?
I don't think I really was, you know. I think it's been an ongoing thing. I think that my relationship with my father was already interestingly positioned. My father was a drug dealer, and there was nothing wrong with that, and I still don't see anything wrong with that in my mind at all. He was providing in the way that he could. My father was super smart. My father was very like politically akin to things, a reader, you know? And I think that, but he also wasn't around a lot, you know? So it was an interesting thing because it was like I was experiencing the loss of someone who had a certain type of presence there, but the presence was not necessarily because of his physicalness. It was because of the things that he would impart on me. And that relationship didn't end at that point.
How did it not end?
I still have a relationship with him.
Okay.
Significantly. Significant. I think that he's led the pathway for me to be who I am. I had, I think, 2 significant moments in my adult life that were like, oh, okay. One was, you know, Black folks, we're tapped in. Spirit, dreams, you know, our elders, our parents, moms, all, you know, they tapped in. My aunt had a dream one time. I was in grad school, struggling, and she was like, you know, your dad came to me. He said to tell you, choose what you want to do and go for it. I'm here, basically. Okay? No worries, and this is what you get at the end of that statement, you know, is who I am right now. That was about 3 years ago. And
did you see that as sort of affirmation?
Big time.
For what were you struggling with the decision?
I was struggling with a lot of decisions. That's the thing. Deciding whether or not I wanted to transition wasn't even at the front of my mind because I was having so many other difficulties deciding just what I wanted to do with my life, you know, like
professionally,
personally,
okay,
personally,
okay,
like, you know, like you think that you have this pathway set for you, and when it's not fulfilling what you thought it was, it's like, what's up, you know, like I was in grad school and I was struggling. This was not where I was supposed to be. Well, I wouldn't say it's not where I was supposed to be, but the intention behind it, I had no intention. You know, I just thought that this is what I was supposed to do. I'm supposed to be a smart kid.
Okay.
I'm supposed to go to school. You know, I'm the first to graduate college. Like, you know, it's a lot of pressure. I'm like my dad's only child. That's another thing. You know, it's a lot of like, you gotta do this, like you gotta, you know? So I'm like, all right, like I'm gonna go to school, I'm gonna go to grad school. But it was toxic, you know, it was terrible. You gotta be really prepared for certain things. You gotta go into it knowing I didn't know what I was getting myself into when I went there.
Aside all of the other stuff.
Aside everything else.
It's life alone is a motherfucker. And then you add this other piece, it just adds more or different.
A different difficulty, especially when you can't name it. And I'm glad that we had that open that way, because a lot of this comes down to, can you name the thing that is causing you distress? internally. Oftentimes we can't name that thing. And it's not because we don't know the name. And that's the difference too. You know what it is, you just can't say it.
I don't know that struggle. And I think that probably is one of the biggest challenges I've had with trying to understand connect is a better word than understanding.
I think, good.
Because I don't think I ever will. And I think sometimes with two people sitting down, unless they can walk away with a understanding that it wasn't useful. If I can connect with your pain and with your love and with the challenges associated with balancing all of that, trying to find yourself, trying to be okay with whatever you answer with that. That's what I feel that's what I really am trying to do with the space. And sometimes a part of me doing that in the way that I connect is by asking. Every feeling that I have is associated with a picture. So like when I listen to music, those sounds actually turn into pictures that then translate into emotions. And the emotions can be pictures, they can be these things that I can move around in my head and heart to connect with. So sometimes when I'm asking a question, it's so that I can create the clearest picture I can create in order to connect with what is created in that picture. Not to judge it. It's never necessarily, my initial reaction might be to judge it, but it's never to judge it. It's to not intentionally. And I can push past the judgment to get to the deeper meaning. Because what I do recognize is that first feeling ain't got shit to do with the other thing. That's a me thing. But I gotta own that. And and I gotta be honest about it in the process. So when you say what you were saying about not being able to name it, I feel like that's a different kind of struggle. Because one of the things I see as a person configured the way that I am, a lot of what I'm seeing I feel is being imposed on me. And maybe that's because that's just what a motherfucker feels when they've been walking around doing whatever it is that they want to do. Does that make sense?
Are you saying, no, because a little bit, are you saying that the conversation around like basically expanding genders isn't being imposed?
It feels like that.
Okay. Through what, like TV or?
All sources.
Well, I would just push back to say that the imposing starts with the compulsory like patriarchy and the compulsory heterosexual, heterosexuality. You look at Spy Kids. It's a kids movie. It's filled with heteronormativity, right? Like Shrek, heteronormativity. Like
that's a push.
It's ingrained in everything we do, to the point where even trans people have a difficulty breaking from that, despite the fact that we kind of exist almost like outside of it. But people, even the trans community has difficulty with figuring out like, okay, am I gonna play into patriarchy or not? That's still a decision, Like,
is that where the difficulty with naming it comes in?
Nah, I think that the difficulty with naming it is like feeling like you're about to make your life harder. Like I used to say, I mean, when I came out just as like queer when I was like 13, I remember telling my aunt like, or somebody, I was like, somebody was like, but why? Like, you think that I would choose to make my life more difficult in this society? Why would I choose that?
I don't think you consciously would. And
No one would.
but I do feel like my only pushback to questions like that is I feel like there are people who are choosing, not trans people, but just in general. I do feel that there are people who are choosing things to make their life hard because so much about their story relates to overcoming struggle, mainly because I was one of those people. So everything that so much of my value was based on how I overcome. Like I couldn't be just me.
Totally, yeah.
I was constantly creating villains in those stories, my mother being one.
Okay.
And when I couldn't just tell the story separate from all of that.
Yeah.
And because there was other things that I was injecting into it. So when I say that there are some people who choose that, I feel like it runs the spectrum. And unfortunately, I feel like some of that gets wrapped up into one word and it just encompasses the whole demographic, whatever, even if it's not fully accurate. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. It's not a monolith the same way black people are.
Yeah.
You know? It's just like you're gonna find as many different ways of being black as there are black people. You're gonna find as many ways of being queer or gender expansive as there are that many people. The problem comes in where you feel like your literal life becomes in danger because you are existing. That's the problem. I'm not here to I'm not living my life to try to prove anything to anybody besides myself.
Yeah.
It's not to anybody else. But in a society that's built on what it's built on, white supremacy, patriarchy, heterosexism, all the things, you know, misogynoir, like all of that, it becomes a political statement just to live, just to be who you are.
And that's what I mean when I say I feel like it's pushing, because just the fact that you exist makes me feel a certain way. I don't mean it. Hold on. Hold on. Let me make sure.
Just because you exist, yeah.
Well,
but some people do feel that way, by the way.
Yeah. And because I was having a conversation with someone the other day, we were talking about how straight people feel these pressures. And in my mind, I'm like, I've never had somebody come up and say any motherfucking thing to me. First off, I've never met, you're the first trans person I ever met. So where is this force coming from that I profess to feel?
Yeah, it's internal. We are just mirrors, you know? I think for the most part, I think everybody would feel a lot freer if you weren't in the box that you were in. And that doesn't mean that, you know, I think a lot of people get the perception that trans people are trying to somehow we're trying to take the definition of what man is, or take the definition of what woman is, or whatever that is. The goal is to just be freer. Parts of the conversations that you've even had, right, about being a man and what it means to be a man, a lot of it is both things that I like and things that I don't like. That's all it is.
And your box allows you to pick and choose
what I like and what I don't like.
Why does that bother people?
I have no idea. It's a freedom, actually. I want to take that back. My opinion is that this has everything to do with containment, control, of a certain kind of spirit, that would undermine, and that does undermine, a lot of what the society is built on. To be queer, to be trans, to be non-binary, to just say that I don't fit into this box, it's not new. You know, it's like many ancient cultures, many indigenous cultures, like this is like very common. It's important, in fact, to actually understand nature in this way, that we all come in the shapes that we come in, you know? And when that was stripped from us was during enslavement, you know, particularly for Black folks. So my conception of this, and I'm a history teacher, I was in a PhD program for history, like I'm a history buff, like all of this is contextualized for me, and like, oh, okay, if I don't have a conception of who I am, you get to control who I am. You get to tell me what to do. You get to tell me to go to work every day and that this is actually normal. It's not. So if I break out of one box, I start to break out of a couple other ones. It's bound to happen.
Yeah.
They don't want that to happen. And so if you control this box, control this box, control this box, then you end up kind of catching everybody somewhere.
That's a very important piece. And when you, and for me, when you were growing up, did you always feel like you didn't fit in a female body?
Yep, from the beginning. From the fucking beginning. I remember having this moment. I mean, you know, like you have these memories that you're like, you know, I must have been like 4 or 5. Like I'm like, I just know that I'm like kind of just walking. You know how your parents just kind of pulling you along the street type shit? Halfway walking, not really, you know? And I just remember thinking like, I must have just been wrong, like born in the wrong body, because I have an attraction towards women. That was the crux of it. But because I didn't have the language to say like, oh, you have this attraction, it doesn't mean that you are like supposed to be something else, you know? If I had had that language as a young kid, it would have been different. But it was contentious because I'm like, if I have an attraction towards women, the only possible solution to me was that I was born in the wrong body.
Okay.
Right? Like, only
based on the frameworks.
Based on the frameworks. Boxes, 1 to 2. Okay, I have an attraction towards women. Okay, that means I belong in this box, right? So the first hurdle was getting over for the first 13 years or so of my life was like, oh, I can actually be in this body and still have an attraction towards women. That's the first hurdle, you know, of just being queer. That's okay. The second part was like...
Were you supported in that effort?
I was, yeah, no, okay. Totally. My family, I have like, I think a rare coming out story. I don't like, it's a good one. I used it to get out of trouble. I used it to distract them because I knew that it wasn't gonna be a bomb in that way. The bomb was me coming home late. I kept coming home late. My mom was like, I was staying with my grandma in Harlem. My mom was in Long Island. She was like, if you come home late one more time, you're coming out here. I got the school papers, that's it. Of course, I came home one more time late. And I was like, oh, I gotta figure out a way to distract you. And so I started crying, I don't know if I'm gay or not. Like, that's what I'm feeling. Threw everybody off, but they were, of course we would support you. Of course, you know, like that was it. I used it to get out of trouble. And I like that story. You know, I like that I didn't have to deal with my family somehow feeling like I was, I don't know. I mean, my mom cried, you know, I wouldn't say it wasn't like just like open arms, but it wasn't like, It wasn't that difficult for people to get. There are other queer people in my family. Oftentimes there are more queer people in folks' family, you know, like it's a lot of unspoken stuff, you know?
So what's helpful to me is to understand what queer means.
Queer, in this case, I'm not using lesbian. I could use lesbian, but queer is just like a overarching term, I think, to say that like I don't fit into the box. So whether that comes down to
Either box.
yeah, because what queer is saying like, in my opinion, there is no box.
Okay.
And if we
Now, are we talking about gender or sex?
and for this, it was about sexuality.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was about who I was attracted to. But that was, again, language. So then it starts to expand to be like, oh, maybe the feelings that I'm having are not just about who I'm attracted to. Maybe it's about how I see myself.
Yeah. Okay. And that was the first piece, was the queer piece up to like
Exactly.
13. And then you add this like, well, what about me?
Yes. How do I feel in my body? Now, that story, that again is a different thing, right? Like I'm having a totally different experience now as an adult. You know, I'm with my partner who I'm with now, and we having a moment where it's just like, she's just like, what the fuck is going on with you? Like, something. You have to figure it out. It's internal, you know? And I remember saying to myself, we were in Brooklyn, I had a mirror that was kind of high, it was kind of like awkwardly built in the bathroom, the medicine cabinet, and it cut me off right here. And I remember looking in the mirror and being like, I don't want breasts. Like,
Just like that.
just like that. After the, like, you know, contention, you know, and years of things. But
Gotcha.
I'm just like, I don't want them. That would make me feel better, actually. That'd make me feel better. Even in that moment, the internal transphobia that I was experiencing, I couldn't allow myself to say that I was trans. I was still just like, I just don't want breasts.
Okay.
You know? I know.
What does oh man.
Just say it.
I'm trying to figure out, you're saying so much.
I know.
I'm trying to figure out
Where to tap in, yeah.
yeah, because that's up to you, up to the 13-year-old.
Yes.
Is it okay if I said
Absolutely.
this is the queer period where you're
Yes.
trying to figure out who you're attracted to?
Exactly. I'm not even figuring it out. I know who I'm attracted
Okay,
to.
you know who you're
Yeah.
attracted to. Now that's when you're trying to give it a word, trying to name it.
Yeah, so by the time I was 13, I was like, I'm gay.
Okay.
You know? And the other story about the second thing, the prominent thing about my father was like, the one other thing that was present, and I remember visiting him in jail and him being like, you still play basketball? And I was like, yeah. He was like, well, don't play too much because your hand's gonna get big like a man. I was like, what does that mean? You know, like, what does that mean? You know?
Yeah.
You know? So like certain things like that stay with you, obviously, you know, and that limited the ability for me to say like, what would it mean if I wanted bigger hands? Is that a problem?
Is the I think I'm going to stop trying to be so. I'm just going to ask a bunch of questions.
Just ask the questions. Yeah.
Everybody push back.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody's got their shit that they got to deal with to some degree or another.
Absolutely.
Society, and I feel that we all are part of privileged groups, whether you're able-bodied, whether you can
Absolutely.
see, whether you're bald or not,
Absolutely.
you know, whether you're 6 feet, whether you're like, everybody's a member of something to some degree or another.
Yes.
that puts you in a position to lack visibility into someone else's
Yes.
framework, right?
100%.
When I have to deal with the fact that I'm black, nobody's coming to me saying, James, think about changing the color of your skin. But you better learn how to deal with what God has given you and make the best of it, right? And somehow, some way, with struggles and all, we figure that out. Especially as black people, women have done that as a result of being women. AFABs, is that the right? Okay,
Yep.
So I just need a minute.
On it,
so, why do you get to pick?
Why does everybody not get to pick? That's my question.
Why can't you just learn to be happy with what you were given, like your breast as an example?
Right.
Why did you have to cut? Now I'm asking in terms of.
Yes, I totally understand, and my only answer is still, why not?
Okay.
So it's the parallel of queerness or LGBTQ community and the black community is not always apples to apples. It's not always going to be apples to apples. One example of that is language, right? Like if we were to take an example like Kendrick's song on the new album about, I can't remember the name of the damn song.
Mother I Sober?
No, but yes, that's a good one. About his trans cousin and his
My auntie is a man now.
Exactly. People were really upset about him saying faggot, 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 right? And I was like, I understand Kendrick as a writer. I understand the purpose of what he did and how he landed. And what he was essentially saying to us was that he'll never use that word again. That's what he said in a song. It was incredible. You can't do a white person. They were like, what if a white person said nigga, nigga? It's not the same. It's not the same.
Okay.
That's my opinion on it. So all that to say that there are some things that are parallel and some things that are not, right? Like I have the ability to express myself physically in the way that I want to. Why not?
I don't think it's so hard for me to have any opinion about the decisions that are made on the other side. I think what I'm so much of my life has been about up to this point. You're 31, I'm 46. Your mom is my age.
Okay, yeah, she's just about
47, because I'm doing the math.
She hit in the 50s. She a little close.
Hold on.
She like 47.
Yeah. Okay. So I've had so much anxiety up to this point in trying to rationalize all of these contradictions and all of these things. But for some reason, I felt I've always had a framework, a box that I had to work within. And I think what I'm trying to connect with in your story is how is the idea of the box just not being there.
It just isn't. It was for 30 years, It was for 30 years. 29 of those years I spent not acknowledging feelings that could have been talked about and processed in the real time, in the real world, not in a repressed way. It came out because it was repressed. The way that it came out was rumbling. Like it was like a thunderstorm, Like.
Is that what we've experienced sometimes from people? or
In the trans community?
yeah, the rumbling or the feeling that because it's been suppressed
Yes.
for so long, because I do understand how that can show up.
Yeah. I would say to this, I legitimately had a friend of mine reach out to me a couple before I even started transitioning, but I think just reached out to me in the sense that I was always an empathetic person, you know. I was always a advocate, you know. I don't see the point, like you said, I know what privileges I have. Why would I enact those privileges on somebody who doesn't have them? I'm not trying to recreate that dynamic, that power dynamic. I was never reached out to me to ask, like, why are trans women so upset? Like, I had a conversation, I made one comment about something and, like, you know, they went off, da da da, and I'm like, can you imagine actually for a moment not being able to be yourself for like reasons that are like societal, family, the fear of loss, the fear of violence, the fear of like, people are upset, you know? And I find myself even as a strong advocate, and it's funny because in college I mean big on this. I'm like, I'm doing panels, I'm fucking calling everybody out, like, for you white supremacists, this, da 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 da. You know, I'm angry at the experiences that I'm having on in a lot of places. Mm-hmm. But as a trans person, what I find to be most disheartening is how black people treat me. You know, how other black people are expressing their privilege on me for this one thing. When the whole time, more often than not, you know, trans people are at the forefront of most social justice movements in the United States, if not the world. And with no acknowledgement, right? Like, no acknowledgement. The trans people are queer people, right? Like, of this umbrella, like, freaking March on Washington, Bayard Rustin. He put that together, right? Couldn't speak though, because homophobia, right? Arrested for sodomy. Like, the man who put Martin Luther King on that stage. So my thing is that it's just a lot of ignorance, and that gets really, because it's history. It's there.
Yeah.
It's not there. It's right there. But who gets to create history? Who gets to speak on history? All of those things, I'm fully aware of now. That's what's angering. And a lot of trans people, I think, have that experience of now being so isolated. Like, you know, in one of my songs, it's like, it's the margins of the margins, yes, right? And I'm talking about black queer people in particular, black trans people in particular. We have to deal with being black and being trans. Like, that's a double whammy.
How do black folks treat trans people from your experience?
Like an anomaly, like somehow that, I think in a very similar way to just general queerness, right? Like, there's a general kind of distaste, or somehow like this is a white thing, you know?
Okay.
Funny enough, like tattoos too, when I was younger, like that was the perception, that's a white thing, until it wasn't, you know? But I think that black people, black folks in general, because of the history that we've had, it's really difficult sometimes, and this is not all black people. I think, you know, interestingly enough, I think that there's just like more room for gender expansiveness in blackness, because I think that blackness in itself is already a queerness, and we can touch on that. But
yeah, definitely.
of course,
What does that?
We don't fit.
Is that, and by your definition of queerness, that's what it is?
Oddness, like, we don't fit, you know? We don't fit into the society that has been created. Like, we were put into certain positions to make it go, and that's the fit. But any expression of your actual self does not fit, you know?
What did the breast mean to you Why did you feel necessary to
question.
cut them off?
It was essential for me because it was the baggage that made me feel like I was not who I was. Like, it was not the way that my body wanted to express itself. You know, like I myself never really acknowledged them, you know, never really felt any kinship to them, you know, never really felt like anything, really. We're taught to believe that that's how you relate to your body.
By the apparatuses attached to them.
Life, society, again, like, why am I feeling so disconnected from my body? You know, like, again, a tool, I think, of white supremacy, you know, and many other things, all the things that come from that. But for me, it was as simple as, how do I want to accentuate my gender, right? And I explained this to my aunt as well and other people, right? There are a lot of women and men and people in general who get surgeries for all types of things to accentuate your gender, right? Like, you know, men who get the things, implants, men who get like lipo, right? To get all types of things. That's accentuating your gender. You just don't frame it that way.
Okay.
BBLs, you're accentuating your gender, you're accentuating your femininity. That's all it is, you know? So for me, it was a matter of like, I have no connection to this part of my body. I would have a greater connection to myself if they were gone.
So how do you, I don't know if that's necessarily a relevant question. No, I'm gonna ask because it's what I want to ask. Where's the line drawn between? Here's what I think I'm trying to. I don't know if that question is relevant. What I'm hearing you say is that you were given something that you wanted to change.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go out into society that is based on a certain framework, and you are announcing these changes, and those changes disrupt the framework that society placed, it is that piece of it that you're actually challenging.
Yeah, 100%. I'm not against people. I like people. I like humans, and I like humans being humans. I don't like humans trying to be anything else. And when you try to be something else, when you try to play God, right, or you try to play these powers that you really don't have a sense of, you know, this is what you get, right? You get a society that is so bent on being in everybody's personal business, so bent on saying like, well, if I couldn't do that, why should you? You know? And even what you said before, how you didn't relate to the idea of like not being able to name something in that particular instance, you have in other ones, right? Like whether it's naming, oh, I'm a child and you've hurt me, you know, or I'm in a relationship and you've hurt me, or I've hurt you. How often do we even get to really actually name when we've hurt other people? It's all part of the same thing. It's just that the magnifying glass is on people who are right now choosing a different gender expression. And that seems to be so disruptive to like the world order. But if we take stock of why that may be, why this may be so disturbing to people, particularly like politicians, right? People in power, it makes a lot of sense. When you really sit for a moment, why would they be so upset that people are getting to express this way. It's going to knock the other boxes.
I agree with everything that you just said, because I do feel long term, I'm talking about like the next 200 years.
Yeah.
I don't think many people are gonna be giving a fuck about a lot of shit we
They
give a fuck
won't.
about today. So, but that's a process, right? Like it's gonna evolve
Totally.
to that point. And a part of what I feel is included is separating from a lot of things that we have attached to.
Big time.
One of which might be
The two genders. I'm like,
or
just the two?
that leads somewhere, I feel. So genders might be one, and then another one might be humanism.
Yeah.
To where, okay, what if we not to say that anything is wrong
Yeah.
with any part of the process.
Yeah.
Because the beauty of choice is being able to choose. The unfortunate part is it's like giving somebody a bag and there are 30 things in your bag and there are 35 things in yours, but then somebody comes back and tells you, oh no, there's 1,000,000 things in your bag. And you're like, what? Where the fucking other ones at?
Right.
I didn't know that they were in there.
That's true.
If you could choose a lot of different things and you really felt empowered, because what I'm hearing you say is like you feel, I think the most impactful thing you said that's resonated to me is you don't have the box of gender. Is that an accurate way of saying it?
I'm not letting that be a deciding factor in how I live my life any longer, right? Like, and if I'm being real with myself and I say exactly how I feel when I say it, and again, this is what I'm saying, naming things, to be able to actually articulate it with your actual mouth to make the sounds of the words, I feel significantly freer. And I challenge most people to in a mirror, say that, or say a truth to yourself, name something, and see what happens, you know? Like, what I'm experiencing and what I'm going through and what I'm expressing is only going to benefit other humans. It's not detrimental. And no one would ever be able to convince me otherwise.
Yeah.
It's literally like, oh, we're not free, you know, in a lot of ways, and we are constrained, and there's constant attacks, like if it's not this identity, it's this identity, if it's not that identity, it's this identity, like constant attacks. If you can find any solace anywhere in yourself, you better do it, you know? And this is why I make a point too to say that me and a lot of other people are not transitioning to somehow be men. We're transitioning to, for me at least, to be non-binary is the most, like, I'm not this or that. So how are you gonna treat me now? How are you gonna relate to me now? You have to relate to me on a human level.
And that's hard.
How?
As a person sitting here trying to, I'm telling you, it's hard.
Okay.
You're non-binary, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we got there.
Yeah.
I'm technically not supposed to be, well, you tell me.
Yes.
Saying yo, what's up, man?
No, that's not it. It's again, it's about how you're being perceived. Like, you know, so for me, right, and this is gonna be different for everybody, right? Hey man, bro, I'm getting broed all the time now, you know. It comes with the territory, you know. But my family, like my close friends, my people who know me, they use they them, and everybody else can do what they do, you know, like, but once we have the conversation, you know, once we get to that point, to that level of intimacy, really,
Yeah.
at that point, I'm expecting that you can hold the fact that, you know, you can interchange things, right? And that my experience also is not the same as, say, yours or another cis man, right? Like, I didn't grow up like a little boy. I grew up like a little girl.
So that's where the difficulty comes in.
Yeah.
So when I said it's hard to relate, it's based on I'm bringing to this story a collection of ideas and thoughts and perceptions
Right.
from a male perspective.
Right.
Now, I'm talking to someone who is bringing different types of collections of things to the
Right.
situation. So me being able to relate in my natural default and when first interacting is trying to relate, generally speaking, by gender.
Yes, I know.
But the minute I can't
Yeah.
and I have to connect with a human,
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying is hard.
Yes.
Now, I can get there with time.
Yes.
I can get there through that intimacy, through developing that connection,
Yes.
to see that person as a human being and deeper than just that
Absolutely.
gender. But that first initial reaction and how I'm going to, there's so much conditioning there. And so that's when I was
Yeah.
saying it's hard. That's where the difficulty comes in. And sometimes I would imagine that in a lot of cases I would need time. So when I'm saying he, when I should be saying they, or when I'm saying he, when I should be saying she, and I might fumble 39,000 times. I might be very uncomfortable. And one of the ways I try to hide that discomfort is by throwing like a little joke or being dismissive of something. But that's at your expense, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And those are just things that I feel human beings do. Am I transphobic in pursuit of trying to find comfort in our interaction? Am I not honoring the person in front of me? I might not necessarily have the awareness because I've got to turn so many fucking knobs as a human being conditioned through our modern day society to see another human being in a different way than I've been conditioned to.
Yes.
And that is hard, man. It's hard when it's, and I don't know how we as humans, as people, create the pathways for us to do that.
It's just empathy. It's just empathy and respect.
And
You know?
and time.
And time, of course. And time.
Because even with all the empathy,
Yeah.
even with all the respect, if I close my eyes right now and think of a terrorist, I do not think of a white man in an Armani suit
Okay.
driving a Maybach. I just don't.
That's crazy. I do.
so I somehow we got conditioned. Now that ain't even our volition, right?
Yeah.
But that takes time.
It's rewiring. And we all have to go through the rewiring. There are some of us in the black community who hate being black,
Yeah,
despise it,
yeah.
right? Like,
I think a lot more I think there are a lot more who than are willing to admit it. Yeah.
I mean, I feel like they're caricatures, you know, some of them. Particularly, you know, I don't want to get too deep into that, but it's like, there are time, yes. What it really, for me, comes down to is, can you understand so far as to say that, like, what you were taught is not the truth?
That's hard.
It's difficult, but it's not impossible
It's
because I had it.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I think one of the things that people don't realize is that trans people have to go through that process too. I didn't have the language. I didn't have the conversations, the support, the resources, all of those things. None of those things were provided to me in having to figure this out. And yet, what other folks have in this case who are not trans is the trans community. You have the trans community to lean on to be like, I want to know more. I'm trying to understand. How can I support? How do we relate, right? And I think particularly, and I really only talk to Black people, you know, like I really only talk to Black and brown people because I have such an affinity, you know, I have such a passion for what we've been through. So I can't imagine having a bridge not be built across these identities that are like intersecting. I am a Black trans person, you know, like the same way that you said, like, you know, you're born with this and like this is your skin and that's what you got to deal with. Same, you know. So like, what is so difficult about saying that I'm going to commit the time to figure this out? Because we need to.
I feel like it's the same way so much of our identities are attached to these things that society gave us. And the one thing I do appreciate about you, from what I've seen and what you've said this far, is we all have to kill that person.
Oh yeah. I'm not a violent person, right? I really do push back against that kind of language.
My bad.
No.
You're
but
right.
It's important though, because that is what society has done. It is that simple for us to lean into that, to think that that's what we have to do. You are carrying your child self with you. I'm carrying my child self with me. They're always there. They're always there. The purpose is to take care of that child self. That's the opposite of what I would say of this. It's like,
it's a more constructive way, because the word "kill" doesn't sound helpful. Doesn't sound helpful. So let me rephrase it, because that's what I tell, like, that what is a man thing, that person, a new person had to be born.
Yeah.
But parts of that other person had to be let go.
Yeah.
That sort of transformation in people, not everybody wants to do.
100%.
And you've made the decision to do it in a lot of ways. Most of the transitioning that's happening with us is like up here. It's like in our heads and in our hearts. It's not something that you necessarily see. And it's some shit that we can hide through words and through titles of, you know, being advocates and allies and all that other bullshit, and you doing a bunch of whack shit on the back end.
Big time.
You are going through a physical transformation that is saying, this is what I'm doing, it's how I'm doing it, that directly impacts someone's, it's confrontational to the person who's attached their whole identity to something else. And it's hard for them to do figuratively what you've chosen to do physically and in a bunch of other ways.
Yeah.
And I'm saying that to say, when we say it's hard, why can't, there's such a large amount of growth that has to happen that most people just aren't ready to go through, because just you making the decision that you made is just so radical for the average person who wants to stay in their box.
It is to a degree. And the other degree that I'm I'm trying to I think as humans have a difficult time in some instances around this, just like walking and chewing gum. You know, like it's possible that I can make this decision and it not actually affect you. It's possible.
I don't think so.
I think that it is. The reason why it's not currently and why more oftentimes than not is because, again, I'm a mirror. I'm not purposefully being a mirror though. I'm just being myself.
So that's why it has to affect me, because you're being yourself. When I'm trying to be somebody else,
Exactly.
I can't. You are
But
going
that's
to.
not my problem.
No, it's no.
Exactly.
I'm not saying it's not your. So what's good about where we are now is I feel it's the crux of what I feel the challenge is.
Yes.
And it's not, so two things. Everything you do impacts, especially when what you're doing is fucking living your truth.
Yeah.
That is a radical thing.
In
we
this
can't.
society. Yes.
So in this society, that version of living your truth. In
Yes.
another society, there's another version of
Right.
their living your truth that's impacting their society.
Right.
And as we're talking, I'm starting now. Change is hard. The average person doesn't want to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So just by you saying I'm a trans man, is that the right word?
Yeah.
Okay. Just by saying you're a trans man, you're automatically putting it. Now I've got to start filtering through all of these other things that I've associated my identity with. Just to have a conversation, not to say that's wrong, not to say that it's worth it. I never looked at this shit like freedom until just now.
Yeah. Yeah.
I didn't I didn't understand that. So what I feel a lot of the challenge is, and at least for me, is understanding the parts of me that are touched when I recognize somebody living their truth. And in because it does challenge mine. Not their fault, not their problem, but yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, making sense?
It does. And the next step is to not make your problem somebody else's problem. The next step there, so there's that part, right? There's that leap, right? It's projection, a lot of projection happening, right? And it's like, again, just people trying to live here, same as you. I got bills, you know what I mean? Not only do I have bills, but now I got this other social bill of having to walk everybody through this thing that I'm like, I barely have time for, you know, I barely have the energy for. But then before that, right, like, it's really significant and important that people understand that what you were taught, right, it just isn't the end. And I think that's a really difficult thing for people to grasp.
Very.
We were talking, you know, talking to my friends all the time about this. The capacity to learn should, like, why do people think that stops somewhere? You know, everybody can learn. Your brain is always expanding. You choose to, or you choose not to. And at this point, I've already, prior to even having making the decision to start to transition physically, right? Because there's a transition that can happen regardless of that. People can be trans regardless of your physicalness, right? It's who I am, right? Like who I am and how I'm putting myself out there to be perceived. You know, everybody has to be perceived at some point, but even that gets tiring. I'm like, damn, like I just want to be, you know? I just want to be, you know? And I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm just saying, like, people have to realize that what you were taught, like, if we could just start there with, like, it wasn't accurate.
It wasn't.
Like, You know, I don't want to like blow it up that quick or that easily, but that's just pretty much what it is.
And it goes. I think I saw somebody where they said, Tune the Fork is a disruptive content creator that seeks to create new patterns of thought, speech, and imagery.
Right.
It's the patterns.
Yeah.
I never want to lose sight of how difficult it is to disrupt a pattern.
Yes.
It's a hard thing to disrupt.
Yeah.
It's very difficult. The people who are doing that suffer the most, that a lot of people behind them get the benefit of experiencing with the least amount of effort, forging a new road, creating a new path that wasn't created before.
Right.
It's very difficult. And to do that in a thought process, to do that in a value system or framework, is virtually impossible for most people. They would rather, especially when what you're asking them, especially with what my ex-wife was one of those women who worried all the time. In her mind, worrying was automatically associated with love. So if she wasn't worrying, then she wasn't loving you. If she wasn't trying to fix something, even if it was at the detriment of the other person, then she wasn't loving you. The way she was conditioned, her love showed up in a way that was actually not love, but control, and a bunch of other things. Because her perception of that was a good quality to have, no matter how many times she and I would have conversations about how it was showing up, just wasn't, her value system had that wrapped around, when you do this, this is what you do.
Yeah.
The concept of manhood and men and womanhood and all of those things, there's so much value attached to that by the individual. And now it's become a part of who we are. And now there are these people who are saying that you can start doing all of these. And it's like, well, God damn, what does that look like?
Yeah.
Like, how freer could you be if you were freer from one of the number one constraints that society has placed on you that you didn't even know was a constraint? But because I have so much value attached into the idea that privilege is afforded through that, it's like, boom. I'm rambling.
No, I hear you. There are things you're gonna have to let go of. There is sacrifice. Everybody has to sacrifice. The people before us, the reason why we can sit here, do this was sacrifice. It wasn't from kumbaya. It was sacrifice, it was challenges, it was breaking down what you were taught about who you were. You know, like we are in a legacy of that. It's a continuum. It didn't end anywhere. It's a continuum. And Black, trans, and queer people were there for that. We're here for this. It's just a continuum, you know? Like we are gonna continue having these conversations until there is a point where I hope at least that people get to break free from the constraints of the boxes. No one's saying you can't hold on to the things that make manhood, or that you feel value in that, and the same with womanhood, right? Like, but there are other hoods.
And I think that we only had two. That's what we were told.
That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah,
we got more. And if we had more, we have more.
We do have more, and if you had been taught that at an earlier age when you were more open, you might have chosen something different. And that's all I'm saying.
So imagine the man with three sons who became a man, became a father, and all this millionaire based on this man machismo shit.
Right.
And now we're getting ready to ask it. So one of the things that I'm also trying to be mindful of, or at least trying to highlight, is at least acknowledging that there's struggle on both sides, and that people are asking us to do something very, very difficult. Not to say we shouldn't do it, not to say you're not worthy of the choice.
Yeah.
But it's not, because what I hear a lot of people say, oh, we're not going to impede on your life, or this doesn't. No, it is
Yeah.
a full motherfucking disruption. And maybe in long term, I do think it can't be what it is now, because it's not.
It's not sustainable.
It's not sustainable, and it's not. That's our evolutionary path.
Yeah.
I just feel. I don't know. It's just where it is. But so I do want to make sure that piece. And it's not just for trans necessarily. It's for anything. When you show up true, when you show up light, that's going to disrupt a motherfucker who's trying to be somewhere else.
Who's trying to be heavy. Yes. But again, that's not my problem. And it only becomes my problem because you can't contain it. You can't control it, and you can't figure out how to figure that self out with your people.
So,
but I do want to, because I do think that there's something about cis people who just need for trans people to be like, I know this is hard, you know? Like, to me, it's just as hard as like learning how to walk or to ride a bike or to read, you know? Like, it really sucks at first when you don't know that word. You get very frustrated. But did you say I'm never gonna read again?
but that's different.
Chantaneice? I don't think so.
Because I don't have an identity. The challenge with it, I've been spending a lot of time challenging this idea of what manhood is. Mm-hmm. And when I pull a string, I don't like how that feels. Yeah. So I'm trying to understand these different things within myself.
Yes.
Which is very difficult. So because I have an identity attached to it, I don't have an identity necessarily attached with being able to ride a bike. Because
it's autonomy though, you know what I mean? It's like your ability to learn. It's your ability to say, I want this is a priority, and thus I'm going to push through that difficult moment to get to the end. You know, like challenges are challenges.
For what though? A pattern change.
A pattern change, but for your own, it's for you. It's not for me.
But the first question has to be answered.
Yes. Which is the first question?
The first question is, am I willing to let go? Yes. And most people's answer to that question, when you're talking about, because what I'm really saying I'm letting go of is my version of who I am. Mm-hmm. But that's not easy.
I'm not saying that it's easy. What I'm saying is that it's worth it.
So, but that's a choice that person has to make.
100%.
And I think there are some people, now I think I'm starting to understand my own reactions and responses to things when I'm hearing them, because it's not even necessarily about trans or manhood. It's really about me being okay with letting go of an identity. that I have spent my life, my 46 years, my 55 years, my 28 years, and there are some people who are and who have, and there's some people who are willing to let go of a lot more things. Is it worth it? Will you be happier? Will you be more at peace? Will the world be a better place? Absolutely. But at the end of the day, where the hoes at? And, and sometimes it's just as simple as that.
Yeah.
Not to say for me, but what I feel you have done, if it's what you say it is, and I have no doubt, I have no reason to doubt that, is a beautiful thing. What you've had to endure to get to where you are, to express yourself in the way that you want to, and to be as full and complete with that as your awareness and love for self allows you to do. Is a wonderful example. And how can we be better?
I feel like I've been standing on this soapbox again, even before transitioning. You have to know your history. They have made it, and I keep saying they, I feel like DJ Khaled, but like the system, the people who have been in charge, the people who benefit from those systems, because we also have agents, right? We police each other, right? So I might not be anywhere with a state agent, but I'm surrounded, right? I can't express myself in a certain way because other people are policing me, right? That's where we are now. If you can pull yourself out long enough to understand what role you have been put in to maintain the status quo that you somehow in your mind still think that you're fighting against in these other ways, we'd be in a different place. You know, my advice is not go out and meet trans people and start relationships. Maybe, you know, but I think the first thing that you can do, the very first thing, and I think the easiest thing actually, is to just learn about where we actually come from, right? Like what types of ideas existed prior to this society that we are now built in that feels like it's been forever. The compulsoriness of certain things really just started. You know, certain things like you learn like credit scores, right? Like 20 years ago.
That's just really new.
It's really new.
That's really recent. Nah, it runs
like,
every
wow,
motherfucker.
Like you really like you don't have those conceptions, or like I said, like or even like pink and blue. That was switched 60 years ago. Right? The little boys wore skirts. Right? Like these things are not like set in stone anywhere. No one said, here's the big block of stone and this is just it. You know, the biggest thing that we can do is to free yourself from the things that do not bring you any pleasure, that do not serve you, right? Like that don't actually bring you closer to who you are, you know? And that's an internal process. We end up having these things happen outward though, right? So transphobia to me is an outward expression of someone who's repressed. So if I'm experiencing transphobia or queerphobia, whatever it is, or even like people who hate women, which a lot of men do, that's a repression. To me, you have to do the work of figuring out why that is manifesting itself in your body that way.
Yeah.
I can't do anything about that, you know? There are some people who have the ability, I think, to have a conversation like this and for it to actually go light years, you know, not everybody. So if it's just a general thing of what we can do, learn, keep learning. Be a human. Like, you don't. There's a really awesome poet and activist named Alok who says, like, you don't need to know everything about me. You don't really actually need to understand me to respect me. You know, it's people who show more respect to people on the street than they show to a family member, like, you know, because of this identity or whatever it is. Like, those are the types of things, and I've never been that type of person. That's the other thing. As a human being, that's why I keep coming back to, I've never been that type of person to judge somebody off of like something that's like opposite of me, or like something that I don't know or that I'm unfamiliar with. It just doesn't come natural to me to do that. So when it happens, I'm just like, that's gotta be you. You know, that's a projection. And thank God I'm where I'm at. Thank God, you know, years of therapy, all types of things, you know, that have like gotten me. I love myself. I've always loved myself.
Always?
Always. So that's another thing that, you know, again, like I said, trans people are not a monolith. There are some people who have different experiences, and there are some who have closer experiences to what I have. Like, I didn't feel like I lost out on something, you know? I feel like everything happened the way that it was supposed to, on time. You know, if I had transitioned just a few years earlier, it might not have been as easy of a process as it was for me. It was like this for me. I said what I wanted and I got it, you know? But that's because of the years of people who had to go through some, you know, terrible shit in the medical system and all types of things just to get there. Everything for me has happened as it should.
What are your thoughts on children starting like gene therapy, or I don't know if I'm using the right terms. Forgive me.
No, it's HRT, it's hormone replacement therapy. A lot of misconstrued things about children. I want to say that kids, oh God, we've so much about kids. Kids are like one of the most disrespected and like just disregarded group of people on this planet. And the idea that somehow a child doesn't have a conception of who they are, I think is ridiculous. More often than not, kids who are on any type of hormone replacement below 16, all it is hormone blockers. These are things that are gonna block certain developments for children who feel that this would be traumatic to go through. So for me, if you have the resources and the ability to do so, to have that access, I don't see why we would stand in the way of that.
Okay.
Now, for me, again, I've come to terms with things happening as they should. If I had been born in a different world with a different group of people, you know, it might have been different. You know what I mean? It might have been really that simple of like, yeah, that's what I want to do, you know? There's this idea that kids regret making these choices. That's extremely rare. Extremely rare. Like, the most extreme are rare. But somebody will pick that little group and be like, this is why we shouldn't do this, you know?
So you made a comment earlier about playing God with certain aspects of things as it relates to that.
Yes.
How do you reconcile that by condoning the gender, the HRT injections?
I just don't believe that, like, I don't believe that the God that exists up here is like, God damn it, I made you this. Stay that way. I just don't believe that.
Okay.
It's as simple as that. You know, I just don't subscribe to it. Like, so it just doesn't resonate for me. I understand that it resonates with other people as somehow going against some sort of condition of God that God has set forth for this person. I just don't believe that that's the type of, I don't subscribe to that type of God.
So, and I don't have a lot of knowledge about the HRT stuff.
Yeah.
So, long-term decision making for children that's irreversible. Is any of this stuff irreversible?
I'm sure some of it is. I'm not totally versed in all of it, especially for children.
Okay. But you're open overall with the concept of children having autonomy over their bodies to make decisions about what they want to do and how they want to do it and when they want to do it.
I would say 100,000%, million percent. And I think that part of the difficulty with that on one end is the same difficulty like the other side of the coin. It's just kids having autonomy at all, right?
Period.
Like, like I don't want to be at this person's house. I don't want to have to kiss this relative, like, you know, who's in my fucking face. Like, you know, like there are certain things that I think that go hand in hand with this, that it's like, okay, no, we can't have the kids doing this because then we won't have this, right? We can't have them choose this because then you won't have them do this, you know? I mean it when I was a teacher, you know, and getting to work with those students, man, the most incredible thing I've ever experienced, truly. Kids are brilliant. Yeah. And to think otherwise is there's a reason. There's a reason for all of it, you know? And a lot of the trans and non-binary kids that I got to teach were the ones who helped me to see it in myself. Like, they don't have a problem with this. They don't have an issue conceptualizing this.
They don't have really an identity wrap. They like so much of our hang up is in the box.
Yes.
And when you're younger, the box isn't like, that's what I'm saying. I think is probably the most revealing to me in the conversation is that, and like I said, I think I've been fucking with the edges of some of the shit, but it's like, but when I sit and think about the power of what you're saying, it definitely changes society.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm like, even just giving kids a little bit of say changes things. There are so many different things like that, right? Like men crying. Yeah. Huge, massive, please cry. We all need y'all to do that. Yeah. Please, fucking God, please, because it's tearing shit up. Yeah, yeah. You know? And I don't know if you saw me. I let the motherfuckers go. I'll fill a cup. We need it. We need it. Yeah. And again, even that, right? That conception that you aren't supposed to cry comes from the same cup that says that I'm not supposed to be who I am. Yeah. I'm trying to knock that cup over. Yeah. And when I do that for myself, I know that I'm doing it for other people. You can accept it as a spill and try to clean it up, right? Or run with it. It's just as simple as that, you know? Like, my choice is for me. You can understand my choice as a potential opening for yourself or not. Yeah. That's it. You know? But it's not a contradiction. It's not I mean, though we live in lots of them, but this isn't one, you know? I'm not pushing back against what you believe in, you know? I'm just being me.
That's the only, it's, not to say you necessarily care, but you're standing in front of the motherfucking king and saying this shit is wilding. And the reality is we know that it is to some degree. I think we just don't want to see how far down the rabbit hole is. Exactly. But we know we don't, because there's so many things have to change. And it's scary. And we're more comfortable with with things, you know, at least, but there's a cost associated with that.
Of course, there's a cost to all of it. You know what I mean? I paid a cost too. You know, like I didn't get to feel this free just walking through fucking, you know, fields of flowers. It was difficult. You know, I use a quote again from this poet and activist Alok. We come from a history of hunting ourselves. You know what I mean? Like we come from a place of trying everything to remove the thing that we know is about to bring us like an immense amount of challenges, violence. I mean, thank God I have been lucky enough to not have to experience it to a really extreme degree, but I know that it's always around the corner.
Yeah.
You know, like I went to the barbershop for the first time and I'm like, you know, I gotta walk in, like, I'm not sure how this is gonna go. I'm not sure. You know? And if we can get to a point where it's like, I don't have to move like that, you know, because of who I am, because of it, things are gonna be a lot different. But I understand that things take time, you know. But I'm also not I'm really not oblivious at all to how much has changed. Also, you know, like I feel like even in the time that I have been alive, like things have changed, and I see that, I know that, I acknowledge it, and there's still more to go. You know, there's still more to go, because more of it has to do with, you know, again, I feel like I'm a conduit. You know, if I don't realize that it's such a big deal to be yourself until I'm in a room with somebody who's not, and I feel it. You know, not my problem, but I hope that this gives you some an example of how it's possible. You know, I hate when people say to me like, damn, keep being you, keep being you. Like, I'm just like, fuck, you be you. I'm gonna be me. I can't help it. You be you. That's what I need. I can't be me unless you're you. The only reason why I ever feel like I can't be me is when somebody is trying to push me in a different direction. You know? I don't need you to tell me to be me. I need you to be you. Tell yourself that in the mirror. You know?
What do you think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about Black trans people?
Man, so many. I think one is that it's like, you know, truly separate identities, that somehow intersectionality doesn't apply to us. You know, I do take, for example, Dave Chappelle and that comedy series, and I never watched it, but I saw clips of it, and I'm just like, damn, this is totally misconstrued. Like, there's transness in one sense is just white, and that's it. You know, there's no representation for the way that I'm existing, both with, like, can you imagine? Like, can you actually just for a second, like, imagine having all the constraints of being Black. For me, I'm being perceived as a man as well, so now I have that also. But then if somebody finds out that I'm a Black trans man or a trans non-binary person, then I also have like the fear of like sexual assault. Like, it's crazy. It's like it's like, that's what we're dealing with, you know what I mean? And so to think that somehow we are like taking the attention away from Black people or from the Black struggle is obscene to me. It's obscene. It's absurd, and it's disturbing that folks don't have a conception of intersectionality yet. I can't separate that. None of us can. You know, so that's a big one. And, you know, I think also, again, like the thought process is like, okay, well, if I'm gonna understand a trans person, I need to understand then what it's like to be the opposite sex, right? Okay, trans men. So like, let me think about what it would mean for me to be, okay, maybe that's how I connect. No, the connection is, what would it look like for society to keep telling you that you can't be who you are? That's the connection.
And that's a very big distinction.
It is.
And I'm glad that you said that, because my lens has totally been, oh, what if like
Yeah.
I could never understand that.
Exactly.
But I could begin to conceptualize the idea of me not being allowed to be who I am. And I think my only examples of that are in white spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And the amount of time I've spent and energy I've consumed conforming.
Oh shit, sorry.
No, you good. Conforming.
Mm-hmm.
Having so much practice at leaving me at the door.
Mm-hmm.
And the anxiety associated with that, and the overall feeling of just inadequacy, like just built into everything that I do.
Mm-hmm.
Even when I'm not playing the part, I'm mindful of the fact that I got to play the part, so that makes the non-playing part of me feel like shit, because like, motherfucker, you got a front.
Yeah.
You know, when you go into that space, you got to be something else. And I know I am, because I'm Jim and I'm hey. And it's only been until like a year and a half, I'm like, listen, I'm a bad motherfucker in and out this bitch.
Right.
So I'm taking that person everywhere I go.
Right.
I don't know how that is different or layered for anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
I just know how freeing it is as it relates to that. Now I start adding in, oh, well shit, what if that there's another part of me that I'm saying I'm cool with that might still be a fucking box. And then there might, next thing you know, I don't have a fucking body and I'm sitting up here and I'm like, oh. I'm just bullshit, but.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that is what brings people anxiety, is the idea that there are parts of you that you haven't explored yet. There are parts of you that you may have, again, repressed for reasons that are not of your own. And I mean, that can be as small as like, I like this thing, you know, like I like rock and roll, and you can't express that as a child because it's a hip hop shit, you know, or vice versa. Like, all of these things build up to create images or caricatures of who we think we're supposed to be. And if you just take stock for a quick moment, really, and I keep saying the mirror because my therapist had me do this one time, and I remember thinking to myself, well, this is some big shit. I could not talk to myself in the mirror. Asked me to just kind of like speak to myself and say things, and I couldn't do it. Like, really, truly, like, get the mirror, put it in front of you, sit down and be like, I'm looking and, you know, saying how you feel, who I am, what are you happy about, what are you sad about? It's very hard to do. It's very difficult to do.
It's funny you mentioning that, because as the times I remember doing it, I just remember saying bad things to me. I couldn't say good things.
That's massive. That's a huge point. I mean, and nothing is all bad or good. All of it is information. And that's how I take everything now too. So like, even when I couldn't talk to myself in the mirror that time, I remember thinking to myself, well, this is information that I didn't know previously. Somebody who purports at the time, right, to be so comfortable cannot talk to themselves in the mirror? Something's up. Let's explore that. But that's the thing about that next step, right? And, you know, I don't know if you are familiar with this, but tarot cards or whatever, there's a devil card, right? And a lot of people are like, oh shit, that's scary. The devil card is about showing up to your demons and pulling up a seat for them and asking, why are you here? What can I do for you? What do you want?
That's dope.
Yeah.
That's dope as a motherfucker.
Yeah. But
that's
again,
powerful.
Even just that, right? What's that movie? Some movie with Beyonce. I can't remember the movie with Beyonce now. People are gonna hate me.
I Know What You Did Last Summer or some shit?
No, with Mos Def, Beyonce, Mos Def. They had a BET movie.
Oh, no, I ain't seen that.
I don't know. I can't remember.
Oh, when he played the doctor? Who did the heart transplant or something out of Baltimore?
So. It was one part though where they had a tarot reader. It was very like problematic type voodoo. They were trying to like, you know, but even the conception around tarot cards and voodoo and like these African spiritual religions, you know what I mean? And like the devil card, I remember so distinctly seeing the devil card and being so afraid. You know, you're so afraid of that. When the true definition of what it means, and this is what I mean by learning and taking the time to, is to pull up a seat. That's how empowering.
Yeah.
When the first thought that I could have had for the first 25 years, if not taking another step into that, is that this is just scary. I don't want to know nothing about it. Devil card, oh, devil. Don't know nothing about that.
Which is what most motherfuckers do. Yeah.
Exactly. And it's easier. It's an easier route, you know? And I think that it's okay. I don't want to say that I think that it's okay that people take the easy route, but I understand, you know?
So for trans, key piece. I always thought that the challenge for trans people was the identification with a specific gender.
Yeah.
And it's really, is that what it is?
No, I mean, I think that it could vary.
Okay.
You know?
So, but what I'm hearing you say is, because like you just said, when I'm sitting back and I'm looking at a trans man, I'm like, oh, okay, so he
wants to be a man.
He was born AFAB, and was like, oh, I don't like this. I think I'm a dude. And it's like, to you, it's like, well, what the fuck does a dude feel like?
Right.
You've never been a dude. So what does a dude feel like? But what you're saying, what I thought I'm trying to repeat it back in words that make sense.
Yeah.
So I understand. It wasn't about necessarily what being a dude felt like. It was just the freedom
to be neither.
Because that didn't feel right.
I never really had good relationships with cis men. Like I have cis men friends, but even, you know, funny enough, even some of them, even as a queer person, would still want to test it a little bit. I'm like, for what?
What does testing mean?
Test like, you know, I'm gonna like flirt with you a little bit just because.
Or like to turn you or something?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, all of it is about power. You know, and I've never been submissive. Not in my personal relationships, not in my outward relationships. So I don't take lightly to that. You know what I mean? I notice it. I know it, and I call it for what it is, you know? So, you know, yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
How do you fight?
Truly being myself. I fight like, I think when I was younger, I was very like motivated to be radical. The word radical used to like, oh my God, it used to like get me going. I used to be like, yo, you know, from being a young kid, like skipping my 8th grade graduation because they didn't let some of my friends walk because of absences. I'm like, well, fuck it, I'm not going either, you know? Just little things like that, like building up. those types of fights. But now it's like my energy is totally focused on myself and the people around me, and continuously evolving. I'm a transformer. And people love to root for X-Men and Transformers in the movies, you know? Like, that's the team that you're on. It's in the flesh, you know? I'm rooting for myself that hard. Like, I have no doubts about the fact that it's like, it's a significant place for me to be in, to say like, this is who I am. I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm gonna make sure that like I'm not being swayed by people, you know, who are, it's hard to describe, like, it's very little people can have effect on me at this point, because I'm just like, we're all humans, you know, and like, if you're coming at me in a particular way, I know that it's mostly about you. So at that point, I'm already like in my pink bubble, you know? I like to call it that. Like, I'm in a bubble. I'm in a pink bubble. No one can touch that.
Did you ever think you would be here?
You know, I don't know. So much of my life after starting to transition at 29 has felt like a dream a little bit.
In what way? I'm sorry.
Well, yeah, I mean, I just never thought that I would I'd actually be able to do this and actually be able to figure out what the thing was that was missing. You know, like, I didn't understand all of the intricacies of being a trans person, especially as a young person. You know, again, because of representation and things, it's not like it's there, you know? Mm-hmm. And there has been a lot of progress over the last few years in what can happen. So for me, I didn't know, you know, it was just so far in the back of my mind. I'm just like, this is just not a thing that I'm gonna realize in this lifetime. You know, whatever that gap was that I was feeling, I'm like, it just must have been a gap that was left over from the previous life. Maybe I'll get to fulfill it in the next one. And to be able to say like, no, I can actually do it now, it's crazy. It's the most fulfilling thing I've ever done. And I'm like, you know, maybe this is how people feel when they do get those, like, you know, those other surgeries or whatever it is, you know, and even myself would have opinions about things like that. Like, oh, you know, you don't need to get a BBL, or you don't need to get, whatever it is, you know. Who am I to say that about what you want and how you want to accentuate your body? It's just like, I'm totally tapped out of having opinions about other people and what they do, so that I can live and focus that energy and attention on what I want to do.
And one of the things you want to do is make music.
Big time.
Okay.
Big time.
Which we're going to get to right now.
Let's get to it.
So, Father Venus.
Yeah.
Is your rap name.
That's my rap name.
Where'd that come from?
Father Venus is, the Venus comes from my birth chart. I'm a Libra moon and I'm a Libra rising, which is actually the opposite of my sun sign, which is an Aries. So an Aries is like the first in the zodiac, the baby, the like blazing the pathway, you know, very like, pow. And Libra is the opposite of that. Libra is very, you know, it's about the lushness, about the beauty of things, taking your time, and you know, I'm just a person who truly has come to realize that I really enjoy the process. Yeah. And you know, so that's where the Venus comes from, you know, like the color is like, it's pink, it's purple, like that's my essence, you know. And Father is like, I think even before I started transitioning, I had a father-like essence, like a grandpa almost, you know, like I feel like I'm able to articulate other versions of masculinity. And that's where the Father Venus like ties in, you know? There's another way to be masculine.
I got to stick a pin in that because I got questions
Yeah.
about the. How do you use your music today, creatively and like for Chantaneice?
Yeah. My music is it's really about rewiring, and I make a lot of music that, again, I believe and know that sonically, that's the strongest vibration that you have. It's the most powerful vibration that we have. Visual, taste, other vibrations. Sound is the most powerful one.
Okay.
So when I'm listening to music, I'm constantly thinking about what's happening with that vibration. What are you sending through me, you know? And at some point, I think I just got kind of tired of like feeling like I wasn't hearing what I wanted to hear, you know? Things that felt really empowering to me. Things that didn't take jabs at me in the process of me liking the song, you know what I mean?
You're like,
it's
oh,
really
oh,
fucked up.
shit,
You feel
that
like,
didn't-
yeah, damn, man, you just threw faggot in there, like that sucks, you know? And that happens often, you know, like that from the one, you know, again, from as little, not even as little, I don't even want to say that, but from as common as bitch to then faggot, this, you know, like, it's just like, man, this is not the food that I want to be eating, you know? I like the beat and I like what you're doing, you know, but it has a limit. And so my music really came from that. Like, okay, how can I figure out how to say things? And I think a lot about, I haven't done a show yet, but I think a lot about a whole crowd being able to say what I'm saying and what that's gonna do.
From that vibration.
From the vibration. Everything that I say and that somebody could repeat back to me is only gonna feed you. Nothing's gonna take away. Nothing's gonna make you feel like, damn, like, should I be doing this? You know, everything is about feeding your spirit, you know? And that's what it does. It does that to me first. And then my hope is that it does it in putting it out, you know, that it does it to other people who need to hear it and who want to hear it, you know?
Would a perfect world scenario for you be known as like a trans MC or just a fucking dope ass MC?
I think a little bit of both, you know? At the end of the day, it's my experience, you know? I am someone who has, you know, I wrote on the music application, one, they had like, you know, what are your identities? Describe them. And I'm like, I am a black, trans, non-binary person who has an experience of being perceived as a black, queer woman. That's significant. I'm like, damn, that's big. I have the thing that goes off in my mind when somebody's being misogynistic, you know, and when somebody's being creepy or patriarchal.
Which is a lens most dudes
Don't have. But my swag, my everything else is what you may get somewhere else, right? So the combination of it is like, okay. So yeah, I want people to know that because that's how I became who I am, you know? That's how I got to stand on the soapbox that I'm standing on, to say what I'm saying, you know, to talk about Audre Lorde being my Lord, you know? I subscribe to that Lord more than I do the other Lord, you know? So that's significant, you know, and I find that to be just extremely empowering.
Who's Audre Lorde?
Audre Lorde is an incredible queer scholar, poet, 70s, 80s, 90s. She died from cancer, young, as a lot of black academics do. A A lot of black women academics die very early, actually. A lot of studies have been done on that. Very significant. Again, you know, just having to do everything. You know, you're in like stretched across 5 departments and taking care of the black kids in schools and your own kids and your husband, you know, all types of stuff. But Audre Lorde is a just, I mean, has had one of the biggest impacts on me. Just poetry is not a luxury. Just a person who was standing in her identity as a queer black person, understanding that intersectionality and speaking on it, and speaking on the contradictions that exist both in the queer community and the black community, for her to be able to exist in both. And yeah, I'd love to just give you more recs on her. She's just.
Do you feel that the full organization of LGBTQ fully serves trans people and understands?
No.
Because I feel like trans experiences and needs are very unique relative to the overarching umbrella, and I know very little about it, but I'm curious to know like how you feel.
Yeah, I think that, again, like I said, that because we're not a monolith, there's always conflict. You know, in Audre Lorde's time, and in like, you know, Marsha P. Johnson, who was a black trans woman who, you know, basically Stonewall, like what happened that was black trans women who did that, who were fighting against police and throwing rocks at police and, you know, fighting against police brutality. Like, in that time, they would speak about what it felt like to be trans and what were like queer men, white men places, you know, being spat at and kicked out of places, and you know what I mean? Like it's not like trans people just have this like welcoming in the LGBTQ umbrella as well. Like some people are like, well, we didn't go that far. Like, you know what I mean?
Like
that's legitimately what it is. Like, we did not go that far, you know, or you're making it harder for everybody to accept us. Like, that's a legitimate argument. Again, assimilation. And I'm just like, damn, like projection again. What are you assimilating into?
So if there's one group who's saying that we weren't going that far, is there another group? Is there another segment of the group that's saying we need to go further?
That's probably trans people.
So there's nothing there.
I don't think that so I don't think this is a good, I guess if there's like if there's layers to it, right? Like, I'm not sure. I think that other people who are in that margins of the margins is what I would say. Yeah. I think are trans people. I think are immigrants who may be trans as well. Mm-hmm. I think it's disabled folks who are trans as well. You know, like, I mean, like.
Those are different, yeah.
Again, just different combinations of the intersections. And so like there are, I'm sure, certainly moments where in trans spaces where disability is not being considered, you know, or fat phobia. That's a big one. That's a huge one.
In general? Okay, I got you.
Everywhere, but also in LGBTQ spaces, right? Like, are we making space for our like fat, trans, and queer brothers and siblings?
So what is the ultimate of there's always going to be someone, right?
Yeah.
So the question, I guess, at that point then becomes, are we leaving space for those who feel, are we leaving space?
That's all it is.
Are we, okay. And then once, answer that question, and then make sure that people have access to using that space when they feel they're not being considered.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like you said, everybody has a privilege. Everybody has something that they can lean on, you know, to make space for someone else. We all have blind spots. I have like, we all have blind spots. I'm never gonna be too in my ego to believe that I don't, to believe that I don't have the capacity to make a mistake or to hurt somebody because I'm trans, or, like, that doesn't work that way. I think that happens sometimes with black folks, right? Well, I'm black, right? Like, I can't, like, again, privileges, right? We have these different things that come through. And the most important thing that I can do is, like, if I can understand where those blind spots are, that on one hand, and at the same time, just always maintain that what my purpose is to never make somebody feel like I'm against them, that for something that, for who they are, or, like, that will always create the empathy I think that we need to have the cross connection.
Yeah.
I'm never too egotistical to think that I won't make a mistake, or that others won't make a mistake, right? Like, misgendering and those things that happen, those are not, like, people, oftentimes it's the people on the other end who feel worse, like, oh, like, it's okay. You did it, you fixed it. That's more important. You know what I mean? Like,
You mentioned Dave Chappelle earlier.
Yeah.
Relative to what you just said now. What were your thoughts about what you saw? How'd you feel was he out of line?
Yeah, he was. I don't understand what his obsession is.
And you feel that he has an obsession?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I don't understand what is so difficult. Like, the one example, like, there's the comedy specials, that's one, right? And then we can, like, chalk it up to, like, okay, he's making jokes, right? Which, again, I'm like, at some point we're gonna have to stop being the butt of the joke, because it creates violence, But when he went to his alma mater, or whatever, the Duke Ellington School, and the kids protested, I read that article, and I remember thinking how the kids were expressing themselves and trying to express themselves to him, and trying to say, like, well, misgendering hurts us. Imagine you yourself are walking around and you go by he, him, and somebody just decides that they're gonna just call you she. Like, it's gonna fuck with you. It's going to fuck with you. So, to not understand that part and to continuously double down on it, for me, like I said earlier, signals to me that there's something else going on. And I don't know what, because I don't know him, and it's not my problem. You know what I mean? That's for his people and for him to figure out. But you're not gonna confuse me in thinking that I don't know what's going on, up there.
So did you watch his alma mater stand up?
No.
Okay. Those are the kind of things that I feel are tough in terms of understanding perspectives and what's going on. Let me ask you another question before I say what I'm gonna say. Do you feel he has any type of negative feelings or thoughts about the trans community?
Most definitely.
Okay.
What I think is that, again, there's just this, like, long, for folks who have, I think Dave Chappelle has an incredible keen understanding about blackness from a black man's perspective. Like, I used to watch some of the stuff, and I was never a huge Chappelle fan to begin with, but I respect mastery, like, if,
Yeah.
no problem. But at some point, it's kind of just like, if you're not able to take in what people are saying about what you're putting out, you know, then particularly Black trans people, you know, I'm not saying that white trans people don't have a place in the conversation, or you know what I mean?
No, it's okay if you're saying they don't. No.
Yeah, no, I mean, to a degree, you know, because even in that, we experience racism. You know what I mean? And that be some bullshit, but it happens. You have to be able to understand that your issues with the way that you're being treated in this society as a Black person is conditioned also on you understanding your position against this other group, you know? And the way that all of his comedy is positioning Black trans people as almost like non-existent.
So how do you, and that's what I mean when I say tough, because how do we, and I think the biggest thing you said is you feel like he has an issue with your community. So if it's hard to kind of go past that at that point, because it's like, okay, well, if I feel now, how do I make you feel like I don't, right? And so that's a performance-based thing, right? So now I've got to do something to make these people feel like, even if I don't feel that way.
Right.
So, and then the next question is, what level of investment do I have in trying to do something to make somebody feel something different, especially when I didn't feel that way?
Right.
And sometimes we all are doing, to some degree or another, a portion of that, and to what that looks like. And I never, you know, I'm not looking at what he's saying and how he's saying it through the same lens as you are, because it's just different.
Experience.
But I don't know how we leave room in those instances. And I don't know how, because the challenge, I feel, is how can it, I'm hearing trans people say that shit is harmful. It can hurt motherfuckers, right? And I'm hearing him say, okay, it can harm motherfuckers, it's hurtful, but there's a lot of things that's hurtful and harmful to people that a lot of motherfuckers are okay with in both segments of the community. Now we're picking and choosing this one specific thing to hang our hats on, when there's a lot of other shit that we really could be going in on. And I don't know how collectively we leave room for that, especially when people are seeing different things and they're saying, see what I'm seeing as the truth. Even if what you're saying isn't true. That's a hard thing to negotiate between two people.
Yeah, it's gonna be difficult, you know. He seems like a person, again, like even before all of this, he had his beliefs about certain things. Like he has blind spots.
Yeah.
He has big ones. He has big ones about Black women. He has big ones about Black trans people. And that's just it.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, he just does. And you can make a joke about it.
But are they, so do we ever separate blind spots from hate? Or are they synonymous?
They're very close. And I think that he has transgressed into the hate part because you weren't able to accept the conversation that was being brought to you about what your comedy did. So again, like if you're unable to have a conversation about the material that you're putting out and the actual material effect it has on the people that the subject is about, that's we're moving past blind spot, right? Because now I'm making you aware, excuse me, and you're like, you know, that I'm listening.
No, you should.
And you're just like, you know.
So from a black dude's lens, I hate the fact that black people kill people. Black people kill black people, bro.
Yeah.
That bothers me to no fucking end. I hate that we have music that condones, propagates the subjugation of women, objectifying them, all of these things that we as a community reinforce and that other communities profit off of.
Yep.
Now, I am not trying to necessarily, I'm not trying to equate trans struggle with what we're dealing with as a people with this shit. But what I'm hearing him say at times, there's all of this shit that's going on and y'all want to fuck with me and give me shit over this thing over here, and not even necessarily saying trans, but because one of the things I say all the time, I've never met a trans person. I don't have an issue with the trans community. When I sit down and have a one-on-one, I know how to listen, I know how to love, I know how to admit my motherfucking faults and flaws, I know how to say I'm wrong when I'm wrong. I should never have a motherfucking issue with somebody on a one-to-one situation.
Right.
Now, if somebody comes up here and asks me to go do a whole bunch of shit and jump through some hoops, depending on how I'm feeling that day, I might tell you to kiss my motherfucking ass. I might, just depends on how I'm feeling and how you respond. Let me be first. First, I might ignore you.
Right.
Then if you are responding to a way that's pissing me off or whatever, and I'm like, I ain't got to say nothing now. I might be on some kiss my ass shit.
Right.
I might get a t-shirt that say kiss my ass.
Yeah.
I don't mean nothing necessarily by, but now you didn't piss me off.
Yeah.
Now I'm in my asshole mode.
Yeah.
So, especially when I'm looking at all of these other things that are around that are taking place. And one of the challenges, not to speak necessarily for him, but just in terms of the lens, I'm like, there's a lot of shit that we could be addressing in our community as black people that we could be rallying around to really motherfucking galvanize ourselves around. And then there's this thing up here that wants to, and I'm saying thing as a dismissive thing, and that's not what I'm trying to say. But in terms of, there's this one thing that's being used to even further divide us from what's really going on. But the people up there that are saying, hey, there's this thing, it's a real fucking thing. It's a real fucking thing to them.
I mean, it actually is real. Like the conversation around black on black people, like black on black killing or whatever. Like, again, the conception is that that's just like cis people killing each other. Black trans women are being killed by black cis men. That's black on black violence.
Yes.
So where's the concern for that? That's my thing is like.
So we're not rapping about that though. And the minute a motherfucker raps.
That's not true. That's not true. Pushback, big time.
Okay,
People talk about, I mean, in one form, that is what he did, right? Like Chappelle's like the rap comedian, you know, he's the one that's like, you know, comedy and rap, like there's a certain connection, right? He's very much constantly invested and involved with other rappers. But people talk about, oh, well, that's why your bitch look like a man. That's transphobia. I'm saying that the conversation and through rap around disregarding what it means to be a trans person and the experiences of transness happens all the time.
So you're definitely looking at it with a lens. So you said the first thing, big pushback, rappers killing trans people. That's what we said at first. So are you and that's what you push back on? Because what you added
saying
to after that.
there is rap that facilitates the energy and the philosophy that allows for black trans people, particularly black trans women, to be killed. Yes.
Okay. That I understand.
Yeah.
I agree with.
Yeah.
But rappers aren't just flat out going and saying, we're talking about doing that to each other. And we're talking about doing that to women. So here's what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. We're agreeing and accepting as a society a certain level of fucked up behavior, right?
Accepting, but yeah.
Accepting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, loosely.
Yeah.
There will be a totally different, let me ask you a question rather opposed to me making a statement. Do you think it would be a totally different reaction if Lil Durk made a comment about doing something to a trans person specifically because they're trans over than just killing a dude just because he was an ops? Do you think that'd be different reaction?
Yeah, I do, but I also think that like these are all again coming from the same cup, you know? Like I do think that it would be different because trans people are marginalized in a different way. Like trans people are marginalized, you know, where their names and their genders are not even being presented as such when they're killed. You know, imagine that. Like, you know, after being murdered, you still don't even get the peace in the way that people are treating your murder. You know, like that's the difference.
So we're talking about life is life and human is human, right? Mm-hmm. So why would not the black dude's life, who was the op who got killed, why would there not be the same level of reaction from the trans community?
That's not true.
No, I'm saying, why wouldn't it?
But that's not true.
Oh, so
black trans people, if you look to see who's standing on the front lines when black men are killed, if you actually look,
no,
it's black women who are outside organizing. More often than not, they're gonna be queer. There's gonna be queer people in there, and there are gonna be trans people in there on the ground. You do not see the same thing for black women. You do not see the same thing for black queer people.
You see it for black men.
Black men, at the end of the day, nobody is saying that these people deserve to not be killed and these people do, right? And
it's the reaction that we're talking about.
It's the reaction, but the whole thing is fucked up.
So why can't we scrutinize what the reaction is?
But what I'm trying to say is when you say the we part, right? Because
we as a collective, we as black people.
Yes, and I think it's a real conversation between black cis men to have. And I really mean that because queer people are having these conversations. You know what I mean? Black trans people are having these conversations. We are creating music that's life-giving instead of life-taking. You know what I mean? Like that is what's happening over here. And so the conversation has to be amongst those people, right? And I'm not saying that we can't be a part of it. In fact, I would love to be, but it really starts there.
Okay.
Why are you celebrating this? Right? And why don't you see it on the same side of two sides of the same coin?
And I want to make sure I'm understanding what your response is. Mm-hmm. You are saying that the trans community's reaction to black on black violence is the same as their reaction to a black on black trans person's thing.
What I'm saying is that more often than not, my experiences has been that Black trans people most definitely have to look out for Black trans people. Like that's like the first thing.
Okay.
Because we're so left on the sides. You know what I mean? Like you have to.
I think that's important to highlight too, because the average person who's not connected to any of that doesn't see it all. So we don't.
We all we got.
We don't,
like
yeah.
and it's small. You know what I mean? We all we got. Like I was even just mentioning this to my partner. Like when I meet other trans people, there's a certain look that we give each other. We're almost looking at each other like, I can't believe you made it. I can't believe I'm seeing you. There's a thing that happens with us. We're like, what's up? How are you? You know? How did you make it? When did you know? You know? How did you make it here? That thing that we have, that's camaraderie. That's I got your back. Because more often than not, and I'm not saying this is how we want it to be, it's the opposite. More often than not, we are actually all we got.
And y'all need support from us.
Of course, like everybody.
Yeah.
Like everybody needs support, you know what I mean? And so when people ask why we angry, it's probably because, you know what I mean? Like more often than not, you're like scraping for a bit of compassion.
How much are cis men participating in like that kind of shit? It's like virtually non-existent?
I mean, there are some. I wouldn't say none. There are some. And unfortunately, even, you know, again, the issue is comfortability with sexuality, with gender expression, with gender expansion, because there's hope, is what I'll say.
Okay.
You know, my brother is cis. My brother is a man's man. And the way that he responds and has responded to me in my transition has been beautiful. You know, like he goes out of his way to make sure that I feel comfortable. You know, that he constantly, I got text messages, Sib, you know, like, oh, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, you know? And I'm like, that's his way of making sure that he's a part of my life and that he is being clear that he's on my side. You know, that that's my brother, you know? So I think there's tons of capacity for it to happen.
What can a non-brother do that would make you feel like they see you and
a non-brother? Like
you said, like your brother.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, just like on a normal level, I think it's just like, I mean, I think one of the most basic things is pronouns, you know? Like, I like when people interchange it. I like when people use he and they, you know?
Okay.
I don't use she, you know? So it's like to respect that. And, you know, I think that's a real basic one.
And I feel like it's an acknowledgement of what's across from you.
Yeah, and it's practice, you know? Like I said, like I think that's part of it. Like I don't expect for people to just get it all the way. Some people do. Like when my students were coming out to me, it didn't take me no time to figure that out for them, you know? Oh, okay, you use they, them? No problem, right? Shout out to my friend Dory, but she mentioned this thing about the way that kids in like a software update, you know? Is that a person?
Go ahead.
Okay, like a software update, you know, you have to be able to update your software. The kids come ready with that though.
Yeah.
You know, so as you get older, you have to be able to update, stay with the times, respect people, and, you know, nobody's trying to take anything away. And I think that ends up being the feeling. No one's trying to take anything away. The goal is to expand.
Yeah.
And we all benefit from that. And the last thing I'll say about that is like the Combahee River Collective is a black feminist collective from the 70s. Audre Lorde, like a bunch of other people, Barbara Christian. They have this theory about if the person who is at the lowest, right, like of the hierarchy, actually receives full rights, full acknowledgement, then by default, everybody else will. And I'm like, I remember learning about this in college and being like, oh, that makes a lot of sense to me. And at the time, for them, it was black queer women. That was what they were, that was the bottom of the bottom in their minds, right? Because trans people weren't entering those conversations yet, though we were on the front lines, right?
Yeah.
Stonewall, all types of things. We just weren't put into the spaces. Like, we weren't allowed there because it's too much, you know? So in my mind now, if I'm thinking of the lowest of the lowest of the lowest, who is dealing with all of the spectrums of things? That's, in my mind, that's like a dark-skinned, black, queer, trans, non-binary, potentially not, you know, seeking to pass, right? But seeking an androgynous or kind of just whatever. That's gonna be the person, disabled, potentially, poor, though not like someone who didn't get to go to college. That's gonna be the person that if I can focus my attention and focus my efforts on making sure that you're good, I by default will be good. And you by default will be good. And so then thus everyone else. That's what I subscribe to. That's how it works, you know. It's not top down, it's bottom up, you know. That's what I subscribe to.